Hi, Jordan. So, Jordan, let's just bring him in. He's here. Our guest for this story is a reporter formerly of MSNBC, Fox News, and TYT. He is the creator of the YouTube channel The Status Coup, and he's responsible for some of the most explosive reporting on Flint, Michigan, and their water disaster. It's Jordan Sheridan. Hi, Jordan. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's good to see you. How you feeling?
A little tired, a little burnt out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's get into it. I want to talk about we have a censorship story involving you I want to kick off with. So I just want to remind everybody, Ocasio-Cortez and a lot of people on the left have an authoritarian streak, and they're looking for ways to rein in disinformation. So she's all for tech censorship. And there's a lot of people. She speaks for a lot of people. So she's just the most vocal right there in the Hill. And by the way, if she really wants to rein in disinformation, shouldn't she have started by encouraging Chuck Todd to quit his job the other day? I'm just saying. So here's a quote from her. She says, "We are going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation. It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to say that things are false. Hey, how about you make it illegal for advertising on news and information? How about that? How about you maybe ask CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC why oil companies and weapon manufacturers need to advertise with them? It's almost like they're buying favorable coverage or something. Hey, here's an idea. How about you repeal the Telecommunications Act of 1996? Maybe mass cable companies shouldn't own news outlets. Why don't we start there? But no, that's not where they start. So what AOC doesn't understand is that the people who are in charge of deciding what's real and what's false are never on the same political side you are. If this was the 1960s, who would they be banning from Twitter and Facebook? Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, because they would be saying they're inciting violence. And how do I know this would be true? Well, guess what? Jordan Sheridan, Status Coup channel, had this taken down today. Outrageous, he says. Now YouTube has removed Status Coup and John Farina's live stream reporting from a peaceful Virginia gun rights rally because, quote, we think it violates our firearms policy. Jordan asks, how are journalists supposed to chronicle history if YouTube and others are outlawing it? So here's the thing that they said. Here's what they said. It says, hi, Status Coup. We wanted to let you know our team reviewed your content, and we think it violates our firearms policy. We know you may not have realized this was a violation of our policies, so we're not applying a strike to your channel. However, we have removed the following content from YouTube. And the video is gun rights activists rally in Virginia State Capitol before Biden inauguration. We realize this may be disappointing news, but it's our job to make sure that YouTube is a safe place for all. If you think we've made a mistake, you can appeal the decision to a guy who works for me. You'll find more details below. So, I just wanted to show you this. What people on the left who cheer on censorship, like people like that, what people on the left who cheer on censorship fail to realize is that the people in charge of doing the censoring are never going to be the people who share your politics. If this was the 60s, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook would be censoring MLK and Malcolm X for inciting violence. Now let's bring on Jordan Sheridan. Now, Jordan, what was that rally? What was that? How did you incite violence?
Yeah, so John Farina, who's been doing great video journalism for us, in fact, he just had his amazing footage from the Capitol attacks where he was the one that got that image that everyone has seen of that police officer's face being just rammed into a door. That was our freelance cameraman, John, who, by the way, shooting at the Capitol, shooting that footage at the Capitol, there were guns galore everywhere. Livestream wasn't taken down. The footage has been seen on all the mainstream media outlets that YouTube seems to enjoy. But he was there in Virginia today. There was a gun Second Amendment rights rally. Frankly, they were more press than actual rally goers, probably because they've essentially created a wall around all these state capitals all across the country. And we were live, no problem. Pretty nice viewership for us, about 6,000 live viewers.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, I'm just getting flooded by emails from viewers that your stream just went down. I had actually thought John just shut down the live stream because it was going on for a bit. And then I see they just removed it, and I saw that email. And by YouTube, which when we say YouTube, let's just say Google. Google owns YouTube. By their own whatever that policy they just came up with last night.
Their firearms policy.
By that firearms policy, nobody would have seen any of the footage just a week ago from the Capitol. Not that all of them were armed. They weren't all armed, but there were armed militias at the Capitol. There were armed Trump supporters or whomever wearing full military garb. Live streams weren't taken down. Other footage after the fact wasn't taken down. But now all of a sudden, because this is YouTube just literally creating these policies on the fly, they are suppressing actual journalists like John, who's freelancing for us, from showing you what's happening. And I tweeted to YouTube, Jimmy. So let me get this straight. If you shut down our live stream and then 5 minutes later, shots break out, how would anyone know anything about it? How would anybody see what happened? How would law enforcement be able to see what happened to find suspects? How would anybody know what's going on at these rallies if Google and YouTube are deciding, well, we can't show guns? I mean, it's crazy.
So
it's absurd.
But I can watch the Fast and the Furious on YouTube, right? That there's no problem with that. And
absolutely.
I could get furious at how fast they're going.
I mean, Jimmy, you could watch countless channels that literally their channels' names are guns, ammo.
Right.
They show a different gun every video. I mean, it's crazy. And I think that the bottom line is YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and as you've been predicting, rightly so, they are under the guise of removing extremists and white supremacists and violence. They are removing actual journalistic content, not for their viewers' safety, their advertisers' safety.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, they have given it away. I mean, they said, this is out there. They publicly said in a blog a year ago, we're going to elevate authoritative content like CNN and Fox News, and by extension, suppress what is not corporate friendly. And they're doing it. And honestly, we're getting to a point that if you're a journalistic outlet, you're going to have to get pre-clearance from Google and YouTube before you could go live from a rally or from anything to make sure it doesn't violate their policies.
So why is this extra nefarious? Well, they go, well, you don't have a right to publish on YouTube. That's a private company. Well, then how about if you just do and put it up on your website? Well, then Google deranks it. So this is that's why there's a problem with monopoly power. Something like 70 to 80% of everybody in the country gets their news from Facebook or Google. So that's when you have private companies controlling the flow of information like that, they now have way too much political power. They can now, which it's been proven. I've seen the reports that they can manipulate people's voting. They can make it the way people vote. They can manipulate it. They can manipulate people's opinion on subjects just by the way they rank what news. If I type in fascism, instead of bringing up a Chris Hedges article, it'll bring up an article by Ezra Klein at Vox. Do you know what I mean? And so that's the difference. So now you're just getting corporate, and you're never getting independent. And now they did admit last year that YouTube and Google are going to elevate. So what that means is they're going to push mainstream news, establishment news, which we were created as a response to their horribleness because they get the big stories wrong. What did they get wrong? Well, I'll show you what they got wrong. 16 years later, how the press that sold the Iraq war got away with it. So that they'll never be deranked. They're never going to be their YouTube. I bet there's videos up right now that still say that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that they are not going to pull down. right? I mean, YouTube didn't get invented till 2006. So maybe those videos aren't up. But if they were, they wouldn't make them take them down because it's CBS News or ABC News or it's CNN. Here, Judith Miller carried water for the USA's worst debacle since Vietnam at the New York Times and then got an on-air job afterwards at Fox News. The day I realized I would never find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Okay, that's from... So here's the New York Times editors. They say, we have found a number of instances of our weapons of mass destruction coverage that was not as rigorous as it should have been. In other words, what this means is we got caught misleading you and doing zero journalism. We got caught being stenographers to people in power for access. And that's exactly what that was. So here's a little bit more. In some cases, information that was controversial then and seems questionable now was insufficiently qualified or allowed to stand unchallenged. Looking back, we wish we would have been more aggressive in re-examining the claims as evidence emerged or failed to emerge. So basically, people were mad and nobody fact-checked us, so we just kept lying. That's what that... We were mad. Nobody was fact-checking us in real time, so we just kept lying. And how many people died because of those lies? Well, here's all the thousands of people who died because of the Iraq War. There it is. So now, of course, they use the threat of any kind of violence now. Anything can be interpreted as a threat of violence. In fact, Twitter, when they got rid of Donald Trump's account, said that him saying he wasn't going to go to the inauguration what could be interpreted as inciting violence, even though Joe Biden admitted or agreed that Donald Trump shouldn't go to the... So here they are just making stuff up, and now they're making stuff up from a real journalist who's done the real journalism on Flint. It's Jordan Chariton, and now he's out covering a rally. So again, as Jordan says, how are we supposed to know what's going on if YouTube won't let us cover it or if Google won't let us cover it? We're not going to know what's going on, and you're only going to know what Chuck Todd wants you to know or Jake Tapper wants you to know. And by the way, Jake Tapper says Medicare for All costs more than our current system. Those are the people that are considered reliable news, right, Jordan? Those are the reliable news people?
Right. And, there's something called the revolving door, Jimmy.
Yes.
It's the banks, it's the banks, it's the corporations, it's the lobbyists, it's the corporate media, and the politicians. But Silicon Valley is also part of that revolving door. People that used to work for the Democratic Party, the DNC, the DCCC, the RNC, you name it, they come and go. They go to work at Facebook at top communications positions. They go to work at Twitter. They go to work at Google. And it's all incestuous.
Yes.
And it's all the very same people that worked on Capitol Hill or worked for Kamala Harris. I mean, one Twitter communications executive used to be Kamala Harris's top person. A Facebook executive who is a communications person used to be with the DCCC. So they are all essentially rotating pals, and they just hop from one industry to the next, but all linked together. And I would say, there's a story, The Hills Rising just covered it. The New York Times had a really, really popular podcast called Caliphate.
Yes.
And it was based on the New York Times, their star terrorism reporter, essentially telling this harrowing tale of a Canadian who stepped foot in Syria as an ISIS fighter and got radicalized and became an ISIS fighter in Syria. The only problem is the Canadian government just charged him with making the whole thing up. And the New York Times, what they did, they didn't take down the very popular podcast that's still making them money in all of Apple and all this, iTunes. They just kind of did we retracted some of the parts. And their editor, the top editor, did an interview with another New York Times reporter on what they got wrong. It's still up. Google's not taking it down. The Apple Store's not taking it down. Rachel Maddow is still a host. She's been lying for 5 years about Russia. It's insane. And specifically on this live stream they took down, Jimmy, for the people that got to see it before they shut it down, it was actually encouraging. Watching it, you would learn a lot of these armed people, they're not even Trump supporters that were there. They made clear, we hate all government. We can't stand Trump. They were actually saying we are against what happened at the Capitol last week, because a lot of people would see armed militiamen with military garb and think, oh, Trump supporters. They were making clear, no, we're just out here, championing Second Amendment rights. You don't have to agree with that, but they were making clear we're not out here supporting Trump or what happened last week. And YouTube shut that down because they're carrying firearms. Now, again, there's footage everywhere on YouTube right now from that Capitol attack that have guns. They're not taken down. So, yeah, it's intentional. It's targeting specific outlets. And let's just be honest. I mean, I told John, who's there and shot it, I'm afraid for you to go live again because next is going to be a copyright strike, or next they're just going to remove our channel without any warning because they're doing that to other channels as we speak.
Now, Jordan, you made a lot of powerful enemies and people so when you blew the whistle on Donna Brazil, right? You confronted her. You read the WikiLeaks. You were the first guy on that, and so you've had a target on your back since then. And then you go to Michigan, and you continue to investigate Flint, even when local news stopped doing it because they're corporate. And you again blew the whistle there and made a lot of powerful enemies. Joe Biden and Barack Obama got in bed with the people who poisoned the people in Flint, Michigan, and so you're exposing those people. You're exposing the most powerful people in the world. And like you already pointed out, Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Silicon Valley, and the White House have a revolving door. So Joe Biden's cabinet is filled with people from the Silicon Valley right now. So if they want to shut us down, if I start telling people that Joe Biden's lying about a war, they're going to say we're inciting violence and they'll shut our. So this is the kind of, that's what they're doing to you. This is the world. And so what people don't realize, this new censorship where it all started was Donald Trump getting elected. And so the Democratic Party and the establishment didn't want to say it was neoliberalism that made people so desperate they voted for a guy like this. So they had to say it was Russia. And so then corporate journalists started pushing for social media to censor people pushing false information. That's where it came from, because they lost control of the narrative, and the narrative was bullshit. Russiagate was completely made up. It was evidence-free, and we've reported it there. So they could shut us down just for that, because we're going against official, trusted news sources. And so what people know, I told the Young Turks, don't you know Russiagate is just a CIA op? This is going to be used against the left as soon as they can, and they didn't care. We saw it being used against Bernie Sanders to kill his campaign. The CIA Russiagated him right at the so. And then still, they're for still censorship. People on the left like that are still for censorship, even though Jacobin got censored by Facebook, right? And even as people like that are getting censored, people on the left, like the Young Turks, are still pro-censorship, which just goes to show you that it's up to people like us to protect free speech, because faux progressives like that are always going to be on the wrong side of history. They were on the wrong side of McCarthy smearing your political enemies. They're on the wrong side of evidence-free conspiracy theories. They're on the wrong side of smearing Julian Assange, standing up for journalism. They're on the wrong side of Syria and war. I could keep going on, but now they're on the wrong side of censorship. What do you say to those people on the left who are calling for censorship?
Listen, I've said on my show many times, I have a nuanced opinion, and I think you've expressed this too. If people are inciting violence, there are laws against that.
Yes.
And there are courts. I have said, yeah, I do think some of the channels that push this election fraud conspiracy, while also urging people to go to the Capitol and stop the election from being certified, yeah, I don't really think that's protected free speech. And I do think there should be accountability. However, Jack Dorsey is not the king of America. Mark Zuckerberg is not the king of America. The Google CEO is not the king of America. And they don't get to decide. They, who we've already established, are a revolving door and were formerly part of the political establishment. They should not be the ones deciding which channels come or go. Alex Jones, for example. I mean, I've seen him. I've seen him say, "Go get your guns. Let's meet at City Hall or whatever." Yeah, I don't think that there's a blanket free speech principle for that. However, YouTube and Twitter are showing they cannot be the ones trusted to determine what should happen to Alex Jones or others. Let the courts, let a public, a regulatory agency, not the government, determine that, because it's already I mean, it's clear they are using either through sheer incompetence or sheer malintent. They are using it to basically wave their wand on actual journalists that could expose the corporate state, that could expose the military industrial complex, that could expose, frankly, Silicon Valley. They're trying under the guise of let's get rid of extremists and people that are violent with getting rid of people just showing a live stream, getting rid of people. I mean, Twitter, we just broke a massive story on Flint, my partner Jen and I. They're blocking us from even boosting our tweets on this Flint story, meaning we're trying to place ads. Since Twitter is suppressing us, we have to actually buy ads to get the content seen like it would have before they changed their algorithm. And they're saying this is political content. Literally, obtaining critical information from a criminal investigation that shows a Republican governor or any governor was part of a cover-up to let poor people drink contaminated water and cover it up that the water is contaminated. That they're equating to a super PAC ad. This is why you cannot allow these entities, which are monopolies, which steal from smaller businesses. Amazon rips off smaller businesses. They steal their IP. They steal their ideas. Then they spin it off as their own, and then they bury those competitors in their algorithm. They're doing it to independent media, and frankly, it's a grave threat because there's very few actual journalists in America, even in the trenches, covering these things. So now they're going to get rid of those?
There's nobody like you go out in the field and you cover news stories. They don't do that anymore. That's why you're the only one still covering Flint and you broke a story. That's the whole point. The thing about...
And it's a disservice, by the way, to the people of Flint and other communities, because I guarantee you, Jimmy, they don't even know the information because they haven't seen it. Their local media is not reporting it, and Twitter's not allowing them to see it.
And so what people will say, again, misinformed, it's ironic, people are misinformed about censorship, is they'll say, well, they're a private company and they can do whatever they want. So is the phone company. They're a private company, but they just can't cut off service to the RNC because they don't like the stuff they're saying on their phone content or their phone conversations. So we have to start treating what they are, Twitter and Facebook, as the basic forms of communication that we use in our society now. And these are considered public squares, which means they need to be regulated. Even though they can be owned by a private company, they need to be regulated, right? And so the private company doesn't get to cut off service to anybody they feel like it, just like with a utility, so that's what we need to do. And that's why we wanted net neutrality. So they had to treat everyone the same. Make it a utility. That's the whole point of this. You make internet a utility, you make Twitter utility, and Facebook, because that's how people are getting their news, and that's how people are communicating with each other these days, and that is the public square, and everyone knows that this is coming. Everyone knows that this is the public square, and it's just a matter of time whether our neoliberal oligarchs are going to acknowledge it or not, because that is the fact. So just like you can't cut off phone service to people, you shouldn't be able to cut off YouTube service, Facebook service, or Twitter, unless someone is violent. There's already a law enforcement, if someone's out there inciting violence, there are law enforcement agencies that take care of that. If there is someone criminally slandering someone, there are law enforcement agencies to take care of that, and there's courts. You know, Alex Jones got sued by those people, and he lost. And so I'm exactly with you. You're right. You shouldn't be able to say anything you want. You shouldn't be able to incite or break a law. You shouldn't be able to break laws, but if you're breaking the law, I don't want Jack Dorsey to be the guy to decide if you're doing it or not. There's a law enforcement agency that has already decided that, and I get to go to court because what you're doing is taking away my right to a printing press, right? Because that's what Twitter and Facebook and YouTube is these days. They're the printing press. And so when someone knocks you off of YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, they're taking away your printing press. And you got to have a good legal reason to do that. And I got to be able to challenge that in court. But now they just do it just like they did it to you arbitrarily. And of course, we know they've been doing this to the left for a long time. It's just that it doesn't get a lot of press because the people who are supposed to give it the press are in on the censorship. MSNBC and CNN want YouTube news censored, don't they, Jordan?
Yeah. And the ironic thing is, Jimmy, YouTube and all these platforms are actually inciting more violence by doing this.
That's right.
Because they are giving, whether it's the right wing or whomever, they are actually giving credence and credibility to the right wing's argument that, you know, there is a conspiracy against us.
Yes.
Silicon Valley and the deep state, which does exist, is trying to hide the truth. They're shutting down our channels, this and that. And that gives the very people that went out to the Capitol a week or so ago even more credence to go out and, you know, take further aggressive actions that, you know, 5 people died. OK, this was not a walk in the park. And you are giving them the license to believe there is a conspiracy against, whether it be the election or your groups or whatever, by shutting them down. And I think, again, yes, I do. You know, the first job I had out of college, tough times, I worked at Fox News. I have seen how propaganda and conspiracy making works. I don't think networks should have free reign to, especially networks that it definitely are urging people to get out there and save the election, this and that. Because, yeah, whatever, if you're just a normal conspiracy theorist like Glenn Beck on TV, whatever, that should be protected. You have a right to say whatever moronic things you want. But if you are urging people to take a political action that will likely lead to violence, there are, like you said, there are courts to deal with that. And honestly, this Joe Biden has already shown an eagerness to do more of this.
Yes.
And AOC, I mean, she's talking about we need to do something about media literacy in this country. Well, with all due respect, it's not for AOC to decide what the media literacy diet in America is. So we're beyond the slippery slope. We've slipped, and now it's an avalanche.
It's here. It's an avalanche. It's here. It just happened. It's happening, and it's happening all over the place. And I just had Chris Hedges on, Pulitzer Prize winner. He's being suppressed and deranked, and everyone knows that. Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.